In this video, we're going to look at JavaScript arrays. Arrays are objects that contain one or more items called elements. Each one of the elements can be some kind of primitive data type, or they could be an object. Let's look at a couple ways to create one of these arrays. So the syntax for creating an array, you can use the array constructor and the new keyword, just like we would do to create any object. So we could say new array, and inside the parentheses, we can even give an array, the array, a length. We could tell how many elements we want to have in the array. We assign that array to some kind of identifier so that we can reference it. So we give it a name. And in this case, we're storing the array as a constant. Now, because it's an object, we can use a constant for the array, but we can still change the values of the elements in the array. Those are still variable. We can still change the values of the individual elements in the array. The constant refers to the array name, and we can't assign a new array to that name without a little bit of work. Another way to create an array is just say constant, give it the name, and on the right side we just use some empty square braces. Now this one won't create an array with a length of any value. This will create an empty array that has nothing in it. So here's an example. We're going to create an array called totals. Now let's take a look at what an array is. Before we go on, you probably see it done this way in JavaScript more than you see it done this way in other languages. You'll see Java and C#, for example, will do arrays like this a lot more often. But arrays in JavaScript are a little bit more flexible. So you see people create them with empty arrays or initialize the values a lot of times. And we'll see that in upcoming slides. But let's take a look at an array. Here's an array I might initialize. A new array, and in this case, I did give it a size. I said, give me an array of size 7 and call it my array, my underscore array. So each of the elements in the array gets a number, starting with 0. So it's 0 numbered. Element 0, element 1, element 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So the length of my array is 7. The elements are numbered from 0 through 6. Each element can contain a different object or primitive data type. So let's say I'm using this to store a bunch of integers. Element 0 could be 79. Element 1 might be 25. This element might be 68. This one might be 7. And so on and so forth. Each element can hold its own value. I can access those elements by using their index number. So these numbers are index numbers, and I can say something like my array sub 1. That's how we usually read those. Inside the square brackets, we just read it as my array sub 1. Its value is 25. Or I could say my array sub 1 equals 99. And I could set the value to 99. Or I could print out my array sub 1, and it would print the value 99 if that's its current value. So that's an easy way to think of an array. You can think of it as a bunch of shoe boxes with numbers on them, and each shoe box can have something in it. Whether they're all numbers or whether they're objects of some kind, it doesn't really matter. We could have an array of strings, whatever we want to do. We can access the elements in the array using their index numbers. So the name of the array, and in square brackets we put their index numbers. We saw that on the little Excel chart I showed you. So total sub 2 refers to the third element, because remember the elements start numbering at 0, 0, 1, 2. That's the third element. It contains, in this example, 411. Well, element 1 might contain 212.25. Here's how we can add values to that array. So here we created an array called totals. and we assigned 141.95 to item 0 of the array, total sub 0. Total sub 1 gets the value 212.25. Total sub 2 gets the value 411. So this array started out with no elements in it. But each time I use one of these numbers and assign something to it, the array grows by that much. Here's another way we could assign those values, exact same values. We can assign them all in one statement. When we create the array, instead of making it empty, we can put the first value, comma, second value, comma, third value. That's done a lot. If you don't have too many to initialize, that's a nice way to do it. Arrays also have a length. So if we go back to the example I did, the length of this array is 7. We talked about that. I initialized the length. This array has 7 elements numbered 0 through 6. So if we had that array on the previous slide called totals, we can say totals.length to get the count of how many elements are in it. And because that number for the length is always one more than the number of indexes, if we want to grow the array, we could do something like this. We could say totals.length, and it would get the current length of the array, which the index number is one more than the highest index number that existed. So by assigning this value, the totals sub totals.length, we cause the array to add this value right onto the end in the next position. All right, in the next video, I am going to talk about using loops to process arrays.